What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. The fight gloves are on. We have a huge fight card this weekend. UFC 154 going down from the Bell Center in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Headlined, of course, by the unification bout for the welterweight title, George St-Pierre taking on Carlos Condit. We have a 13-fight card. We're going to talk about the whole thing, so settle in, get something to drink, and let's get into these fights. We're going to start in the UFC featherweight division, where Steven Siler will take on Darren Elkins. This is the first fight on the Facebook prelim card. Steven Siler, 21-9 on his professional career and undefeated 3-0 in the UFC. Currently riding, again, that 3-fight win streak over Joey Gambino, Cole Miller, and I believe Clopton? I can't remember the guy's first name, but I think Clopton was his other win. 13 of his 21 pro wins have come by way of submission. He only has only has 2 losses in his last 18 fights. Those losses were to high competition, Cole Escovedo and Chad Mendes. So that's, again, no shame in losing either one of those fights. Steven Siler trains out of the pit elevated. Taking on Darren Elkins, 14-2 on his pro career. I'm a big fan of Darren Elkins. 4-1 in the UFC. Currently riding a 3-fight win streak over Diego Brandao, Teatron Zhang, and Michihiro Omigawa. 9 of his 14 wins have been finishes. He's got 6 knockouts and 3 submissions. He is undefeated when the fight goes the distance at 5-0. However, he's been finished in both of his losses. Darren Elkins is another one of these wrestlers who's got a great top game, both in striking and in, just sort of dominant ground control. And basically, I think this is what's going to happen. I don't expect Siler is going to be able to consistently stop the takedown offense of Elkins. I think Elkins is going to want to take this fight to the ground very quickly. Now, Siler's dangerous when the fight hits the ground, no question about it, and no disrespect intended whatsoever to Steven Siler. However, I look at Darren Elkins, I look at the 2 losses that Darren Elkins has on his career. They're sort of at this level, maybe Escovedo's a little bit lower, but Siler, I would say, is even a little bit lower than Escovedo. So I don't see Siler having enough to beat Elkins and his overall game. So I'm going to go with Darren Elkins to win this fight. I figure it'll be a unanimous judge's decision that goes all 3 rounds. In the bantamweight division, we have Ivan Menjivar taking on Azamat Gashimov. Ivan Menjivar, 24-9 on his professional career. He is 3-2 in the UFC, being decisioned by Mike Easton in his last fight. 2/3 of his wins are finishes, so that's 16 of 24. Menjivar, the book on Menjivar, he has fought very, very good competition throughout his whole career. Before anybody really knew who Ivan Menjivar was and knew of his name. I mean, he was fighting Uriah Faber. He was fighting Kal Uno back when Kal Uno was sort of at the top of his game. Hideo Tokoro, who's a big deal in Japan. GSP. So Menjivar has been fighting high caliber competition now for a lot of years. 6 of Menjivar's 9 professional losses have all come by decision. Taking on Azamat Gashimov, and Gashimov I really had to research because he's a guy that I pretty well knew nothing about. 7-1 on his pro career, obviously making his UFC debut. 6 of his 7 wins have been finishes. He's got 2 knockouts and 4 submissions. He was knocked out in his only career loss. This is Gashimov's first fight outside of either Russia or the Ukraine throughout his whole career. Gashimov, he trains at AKA, so he's training with very high caliber talent. You're talking about Habib Nurmagomedov, you're talking about John Fitch, Gray Maynard, Daniel Cormier. So he's training with very good fighters and very good wrestlers. So you would hope, anyways, that Gashimov's takedown defense should be something that is, fairly formidable training with those guys. I can't not take Menjivar. He's a great fighter. I really, really like Menjivar. I thought that he would have had enough to beat Mike Easton in the last fight. Didn't work out that way, but I'm going to go with him again. So Ivan Menjivar to beat Azamat Gashimov by first-round knockout or TKO, because if he doesn't do that, Menjivar gets in trouble. If he doesn't finish the fight early, it could be a long night for him. So I'm going to take him for the first round stoppage against Azamat Gashimov. Moving up to welterweight, of course, a division that's very highly prominent on this card. We've got Matthew Riddle taking on John McGuire. John McGuire was a late replacement in this fight. Matt Riddle, 6-3-1 on his pro career, has the distinction that every single one of his professional fights has been in the UFC. He subbed Chris Clements in his last fight, which was, of course, overturned. He's got a wrestling base. He was a standout high school wrestler in a state that is, pretty high on its wrestlers. So, 4 of his 6 wins and 2 of his 3 losses have all been by decision. John McGuire, 18-4 on his pro career, so a definite experience edge goes to John McGuire in terms of overall fights, but he's only 2-1 in the UFC, so a UFC edge definitely goes to Riddle. McGuire was decisioned by John Hathaway in his last fight, and that decision loss snapped a 7-fight win streak. 10 of his 18 pro wins have come by way of submission. McGuire is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. 3 of his 4 career losses come by way of decision. He fights out of the Tsunami Gym as well, by the way, in the UK. I look at the guy that McGuire last lost to, which again, John Hathaway. John Hathaway, very, very talented wrestler. Matt Riddle, very, very talented wrestler, although he didn't get the opportunity to show it at the collegiate level. It still take absolutely nothing away from Matt Riddle's wrestling ability. I think I'm going to have to go with Riddle in the fight. I'm not a huge Matt Riddle fan, but he's like, he's kind of the most broed out dude in MMA. So I'm gonna take him. I just like Riddle. I'm kind of high on Matt Riddle, no pun intended. So I'll take Matt Riddle to beat John McGuire by, of course, as I mentioned, unanimous judges' decision. Back down to the featherweight division, we have Antonio Carvalho taking on Rodrigo Dam. Antonio Carvalho, 14-5 on his pro career, an even record of 1-1 inside the UFC. He knocked out Daniel Pineda in his last fight. Antonio Carvalho is one of these guys. He had quite a bit of success over in Japan. He has high-profile wins over Takeshi Inui, as well as Hatsu Hayoki, which is probably his career-defining win at the time when everyone was touting Hayoki as, the number 2 featherweight in the world, which I would still possibly consider him to be, but it would be a tough thing to argue with somebody. Trains at Brazilian top team Canada, so he's training with Patrick Cote primarily. Carvalho is a BJJ black belt. He's a judo green belt. He's a black belt in Shotokan karate. An extremely well-rounded fighter, is dangerous wherever the fight goes, and you always like to sort of support guys like that who have a very well-rounded game and are dangerous everywhere. Rodrigo Dam, 10-5 on his pro career, won his UFC debut by submitting Anastacio Medeiros, I believe was who it was. I think I have it written down. Yep, Anastacio Medeiros. Notable losses to Eiji Mitsuoka as well as Maximo Blanco. Both of those losses were in Sengoku, as well as a loss to Gilbert Melendez in Strikeforce. 6 of his 10 professional wins have come by way of submission. He's a BJJ black belt under Jacare Cavalcanti at Alliance Jiu-Jitsu. Rodrigo Dam was, of course, I think, also on Ultimate Fighter Brazil, if I'm correct in saying that. And, simply being on the Ultimate Fighter does not a superstar make. Certainly when you're against a guy like Antonio Carvalho, which, as we mentioned, extremely well-rounded game. So I'm absolutely going with Carvalho. I'm going to go with Carvalho to finish the fight against Dam by knockout or technical knockout inside the second round. Moving to the lightweight division, we have Sam Hands of Stone Stout taking on John Makdessi in an all-Canadian matchup. Sam Stout, 18-7-1 on his pro career, 7-6 in the UFC, so a lot of UFC experience. Decision Spencer Fisher in his last fight. Sam Stout is an extremely exciting fighter. He's been a part of a fight of the night 5 times. He's 3-2 in those fights, so he doesn't always come out on the top end of things, but Sam Stout consistently makes his fights exciting. He was the final TKO lightweight champion before TKO folded. Kickboxing, obviously, is his primary style. Was formerly trained by the now deceased Sean Tompkins. 9 of his 18 MMA wins there obviously have come by way of knockout because he's a very strong and very talented striker. And the book on Sam Stout is the guy's got tons of heart. Whether he's up in a fight or he's down in a fight, it doesn't really change the way that he approaches things. And he's a very durable guy, and he's just got a lot of heart. He's never, ever, ever out of a fight. John Makdessi, 9-2 on his pro career. Both of those losses coming in his 4 UFC fights, so 2-2. Currently riding a 2-loss streak to Anthony Njokuani as well as Dennis Hallman. Those last 2 fights, interestingly enough, have been at catchweight. So his last 2 fights, at least one person has missed weight. I think in the Hallman fight, it was Hallman who missed weight, and in the Njokuani fight, it was Makdessi. Makdessi, Shotokan black belt, so Shotokan karate, another very dangerous striker. This is a fight that's going to come down to basically these 2 guys are going to come out, touch gloves, and they're probably going to stand and bang. I don't see either guy really effectively trying to make this a ground fight, because I think if you look at their combined skills on the ground, I just don't think it would make for a very good fight. And these are guys who have histories of being in exciting fights. I really want to take John Makdessi. He was born in Halifax. I'm a Nova Scotia boy through and through. I really wanted to take Makdessi in this fight, but I think Stout's just the more dangerous guy on the feet. And when it comes down to a fight that's probably going to stay standing, you got to go with the guy that's more dangerous on the feet, and that's, to me, very clearly Sam Stout. But I don't think Stout will finish Makdessi. I want to give Makdessi that much respect. So I'm going to take Sam Stout in this fight to beat John Makdessi by unanimous judges' decision. Sticking in the lightweight division, we have Mark Bocek taking on Rafael, whatever, Dos Anjos. Mark Bocek, who claims to have the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in at least the lightweight division, if not all of MMA. Mark Bocek, 11-4 in his pro career. All 4 of those losses come in his 11 UFC fights, so he's 7-4. Currently riding a 2-decision win streak over John Alessio and Nick Lentz. Bocek holds a black belt in Kempo Karate, but he's only got 1 career knockout, and that was TKO due to injury. And I know Kempo is more than just karate, and that's the Americanization of the term. But, you know, he's got a black belt in Kempo, which is an all-around sort of fight style, but still, he's only got 1 career knockout. A BJJ black belt, as we mentioned, claims to have probably the best BJJ in the division, and it's under Joao Rock. 7 of his 11 pro wins have come by way of submission, and his losses, as I mentioned, he's got 4 losses in the UFC. Those losses come to Frankie Edgar, Mac Danzig, Jim Miller, and Ben Henderson. So that's, to me, that's like 3 real high caliber guys, and then you toss Bocek on there, and Danzig, and Danzig is a tough out for anybody. You move on to Rafael Dos Anjos, 17-6 on his pro career, 6-4 inside the UFC, so a winning record and a decent amount of UFC experience. Currently riding a 2-fight win streak over Anthony Njokuani and Kamal Shalarus, 2 knockouts and 8 submissions. 4 of his 6 losses have come by way of decision, so if the fight goes the distance, not always the best thing for Dos Anjos. He is also a BJJ black belt, and he fights out of Evolve MMA. So he's training with guys like Phil Baroni and Shinya Aoki. So if he's training at all with Shinya Aoki, his grappling and his sub-defense, hopefully he's been working on it, because against Mark Bocek, he's probably going to need it. Mark Bocek, another Canadian. Again, this is a card filled with Canadian talent. I think I'll have to go with Bocek. I know Dos Anjos has the experience, edge in overall fights, and may arguably be the more well-rounded fighter. Neither one of these guys has a ton of power in their hands, so I figure this is going to turn into a grappling match pretty quickly, and when it does, I think Bocek has the superior skill set, so I'm going to take Mark Bocek, but I think I'll take it by unanimous judges' decision. He might submit him, but again, if he's training at Evolve MMA with Aoki, then, Aoki throws up submissions that you didn't even know existed. So, I'll take Bocek, but I'm going to take him by unanimous decision. Moving all the way up to the light heavyweight division. We're still on the prelim card. We haven't even hit the main card yet. We have Cyril Diabate taking on Chad Griggs. Cyril Diabate, 18-8-1 on his pro career, a winning record of 3-2 in the UFC. He decisioned Tom DeBlass in his last fight. Diabate is a 41-8-2 professional kickboxer, so that's, 51 career pro kickboxing fights. He's won 41 of them, got 31 career knockouts. His last kickboxing fight, I only mention this because it's kind of interesting, was in 2005 against Michael Bisping. So I thought, just thought that was kind of interesting. I tossed that out there. 13 of his 18 pro wins have been finishes, 8 knockouts, obviously, with his kickboxing pedigree. He's also got 5 submissions, so it's not like he can't submit somebody. But also 4 of his 8 career losses have also come by way of submission. Diabate is a southpaw, always difficult to deal with, fighting out of the formerly fantastic Team Quest. Chad Griggs, 11-2 in his pro career, losing his Octagon debut being submitted by Travis Brown. That submission loss snapped a 6-fight win streak. If you'll remember, Chad Griggs won 2 reserve bouts in the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix against Gian Vellante and Valentine Overeem, the brother of Alistair. You might also remember Chad Griggs for being the guy that they thought they were going to feed to Bobby Lashley for his MMA debut, and Griggs ended up making Lashley look like a punk. All 11 of his wins have been finishes. 9 of 11 of those have been knockouts. And both of his career losses are by submission. Chad Griggs does not need to worry about getting submitted in this fight, I don't think. I think this is going to be a stand and bang affair. That's the game that Griggs likes. That's the game that Diabate likes. Between the two of them, I think based on having faced superior talent, I gotta go with Chad Griggs. This might be considered a slight upset because, Cyril Diabate has a name in both kickboxing and, international MMA. But I like Chad Griggs. I like what Chad Griggs brings to the table. I think he's just a brawling, gritty kind of guy. And I think he'll just outwork Diabate here towards a knockout or technical knockout victory inside the second round. And finally, the final fight on the prelim card. Yay! Middleweight division, we have Patrick the Predator Cote taking on Alessio Sakara. Patrick Cote, 17-8 on his pro career, 4-8 also. All 8 of his career losses coming in the UFC. Was decisioned in his last fight by Kung Lee. All 4 of his UFC wins, really nothing to call home about. You look at Scott Smith, Kendall Grove, Drew McFedries, and Ricardo Almeida. Really, Ricardo Almeida is the only real good win. 11 of his 17 wins have been finishes. He's got 8 knockouts and 3 submissions. He has 6-4 when the fight goes the distance. As we mentioned, trains with Brazilian top team Canada. Also trains with Sityodtong Boston. Trains with TriStar with George St-Pierre. We look at Alessio Sakara, 15-9-1 on his pro career. An even record of 6-6-1 inside the octagon. Currently riding a 2-loss streak to Brian Stan and Chris Weidman. Both of those guys are top 15, if not top 10, in the middleweight division, so nothing to sneeze at those losses. 9 of his 15 pro wins have been knockouts. He is 4-3 in decision, so he is also above 500. He has been finished in 6 of his 9 losses, knocked out 4 times and submitted twice. Sakara is one of these guys that, well, first of all, this is his first time fighting twice in a year since 2008. But he's really searching for sort of that career-defining win. He's got wins. He's got 15 of them, but he's still really searching for that one win that's sort of like, that's my career highlight win. And Patrick Cote, despite, being relatively, unimpressive with the names that he's beaten, still has a name himself. This is a guy that if Sakara beats him, this is really his career-defining win, and I know Sakara knows that. I figure this is going to be a fight that primarily stays standing. I know Cote's got some takedown abilities, so Cote may attempt to take the fight to the ground, but I think primarily this is a fight that's going to stay standing. I'm going to take Alessio Sakara. This is an upset, and I fully admit that. But I will take Alessio Sakara in this fight. I think he's going to catch Cote early, and Cote did not impress me in the fight with Kung Lee. Losing to Kung Lee, it's perfectly fine. Losing to Kung Lee by decision, when his gas tank is pretty questionable at 39 to 40 years old, that raises red flags to me. I need to see Cote win before I can start maybe picking with him again. But I'm going to take Sakara here in the upset to beat Patrick Cote by first round knockout or technical knockout. More than likely technical knockout. So that's it for the preliminary card. Finally, we're moving on to the main card of UFC 154. Starting in the featherweight division, we have Mark the Machine Hominick taking on, I believe his nickname is the Scarecrow, Pablo Garza. Mark Hominick, 20-11 on his pro career, 3-3 in the UFC, but currently riding a 3-fight losing streak. Eddie Yagin, Chang Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, as well as his title shot, of course, against Jose Aldo when he grew a second head. Hominick's last win versus, real high caliber competition was that fight against Yves Jabouin in, I believe, 2010. 16 of his 20 pro wins have been finishes, and they're well-rounded. 9 knockouts, 7 submissions, so he's dangerous really wherever, but he's got no submission wins since early 2010. So that might be part of his career that he's or part of his game that he's sort of leaving on the back burner. He has been finished in 8 of his 11 professional losses. He is 4-3 when the fight goes to decision. Pablo Garza, 11-3 on his pro career, an even record of 2-2 inside the octagon. Currently riding a 2-fight losing streak to Dennis Bermudez and Dustin Poirier. 9 of his 11 pro wins have also been finishes, 2 knockouts, 7 submissions, so Garza is more the grappler in this fight. He's lost 3 of his last 5, but sports a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. Losing to Jose Aldo, no shame in that whatsoever. Losing to Korean Zombie, no shame in that whatsoever. I know he got clipped really early in the fight. You give him that fight again, maybe Hominick wins that fight. But Korean Zombie's really starting to turn it on and come into his own. But when you're a guy with the talent level of Mark Hominick, you can't be losing to Eddie Yagin. And this is no disrespect whatsoever to Eddie Yagin. But that's a fight that, Yagin was sort of fed to Mark Hominick. That was the fight to get Hominick back on track, and he couldn't pull the trigger and couldn't beat Eddie Yagin. At the same time, I still got to look at who's fighting higher competition here, and it's clearly Mark Hominick. No disrespect to either Dennis Bermudez or Dustin Poirier, who have beaten Pablo Garza. But if those guys have beaten Pablo Garza, Mark Hominick should beat Pablo Garza. As long as Hominick fights to his level and not to his opponent's level, I think Hominick has a great chance of winning this fight. I think he's going to want to keep the fight standing, make Garza stand and bang with him, put pressure on him, and I think he's going to overwhelm him. I will take Mark Hominick to beat Pablo Garza. You know what? I'm going to give it to him by submission because I just want to see Mark Hominick get another submission. So that's going to be my prediction. Mark Hominick to beat Pablo Garza by second round submission. Moving back up to the middleweight division in a fight that could potentially have Fight of the Night written all over it. Nick the Promised Ring taking on Costa Philippou. Nick Ring, 13-1 on his pro career, 3-1 in the UFC by hook or by crook. Decision Court McGee in his last fight. 5-1 when the fight goes the distance, so very good. Nick Ring's UFC wins. He has a controversial decision win over Ricky Fukuda. He submitted James Head. He's got a controversial win over Court McGee versus his only UFC loss, which was to high competition in Tim Boesch. 8 of his 13 pro wins have been finishes, 2 knockouts and 6 submissions. He's a BJJ black belt under Roy Harris and a Muay Thai black belt under Mike Miles. And if you don't know who Mike Miles is, he's a 4-time professional kickboxing world champion. Costa Philippou, 11-2-1 on his pro career, 4-1 in the octagon. Currently riding a 4-fight win streak over familiar names: Ricky Fukuda, Court McGee, Jared Hammond, and George Rivera. Both of his career losses have come by way of decision, but they were in his pro debut and in his UFC debut against a Div 1 wrestler. 3 of the 4 wins on his current 4-fight win streak, however, have come by way of decision. So he's got skills to take the fight the distance as well. He's a boxer, but he's got a BJJ blue belt under Matt Serra, so his BJJ is definitely coming along. This is a problem for me because I really like both of these guys. I really like Costa Philippou, I like his game, and I really like Nick Ring. Ultimately, I gotta settle on Costa Philippou. Costa Philippou to me just feels like a killer in this division, and if Anderson Silva does definitely decide that he's going to take this year off and there's an interim title fight, I'm not saying Costa Philippou should be in it. I'm just saying that if Costa Philippou continues his sort of winning ways here, that somewhere a little ways down the line he might be in line for a shot at that interim title. I'm going to take Philippou in this fight. Again, I don't like to because I like Ring, but if I was taking Ring, I'd say I wouldn't like to because I like Philippou. So I'm going to take Costa Philippou. I'm going to take it by unanimous judges' decision. Nick Ring sort of has this way of winning controversial decisions. I don't think it's going to happen this time, so I'll take Costa Philippou. Sticking with middleweight, we have Francis Carmont taking on Tom Lawlor, and this is another fight that could really have fight of the night written on it. Carmont, 19-7 on his pro career, undefeated 3-0 in the UFC, currently riding an 8-fight win streak, which includes wins over Carlos Vamola, who's a very highly regarded Czech wrestler, Chris Kamotsi, Jason Day outside of the UFC. So he's beating UFC caliber opponents, whether it's in the UFC or not. 16 of his 19 pro wins have been finishes. He is the definition of a finisher. 6 knockouts, 10 submissions, including 2 straight rear naked choke submissions inside the UFC. Trains at TriStar Gym with GSP. He is 3-3 when the fight goes the distance. Filthy Tom Lawlor, 8-4-1 on his pro career. He is 4-3 in the UFC. He knocked out Jason the Athlete McDonald in his last fight. 6 of his 8 pro wins have been finishes, 3 knockouts, 3 subs, so an even spread. He has been submitted in 2 of his 4 losses. He's 2-0 when the fight goes the distance. Tom Lawlor started his career at light heavyweight, so he's a very good-sized middleweight, which causes problems for some people, and he sports a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is another guy, Francis Carmont, another guy who could really be considered, a killer at this division. I'm just going to throw this out there. If Costa Philippou beats Nick Ring and Francis Carmont beats Tom Lawlor, Costa Philippou versus Francis Carmont, it only makes sense. Put these 2 killers in there together. It'll be one of the most exciting fights of the year, and whoever wins that sort of moves up to the next level. I like Francis Carmont's skill set overall better than I do Tom Lawlor's. Tom Lawlor is a grinder, and he's filthy for a reason. He will make his fights dirty because that's the way that he has the best chance of winning. I just like Francis Carmont's overall skill set way too much. I'm going to take Carmont to win this fight. I'm going to take him to finish this fight by second round submission. We're going to move up to the co-main event of the evening in the welterweight division, a fight that would be good enough to main event its own Fuel TV or FX or even UFC on Fox card. Martin Kampmann taking on Johnny Hendricks in what is a title eliminator at welterweight. Martin Kampmann, 20-5 on his pro career, 11-4 in the UFC, so a great UFC record. Currently riding a 3-win streak over high-level competition, Jake Ellenberger, Thiago Alves, and Rick Story. Martin Kampmann has had back-to-back of-the-night finishes, knockout of the night against Jake Ellenberger, and submission of the night versus Thiago Alves. 15 of his 20 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 8 knockouts, 7 submissions. You can't get much more even than that. He's a BJJ brown belt. He's a big welterweight. In this fight is going to have 3 inches of reach and 3 inches of height. Big for this division. Trains at Extreme Couture in Vegas. Johnny Hendricks, 13-1 on his pro career. He is 8-1 in the UFC. Currently riding a 4-fight win streak of his own over Josh Koscheck, John Fitch, Mike Pierce, and TJ Waldberger. So both of these guys are getting wins against high-caliber, high-quality opponents. On that win streak, he's got 2 split decision wins, so fights that he just won by the skin of his teeth, and he's got 2 knockout finishes. Johnny Hendricks is just a phenomenal wrestler, and we'll go over his credits here. 4-time Div 1 All-American, 2-time Div 1 champ at 165 pounds, 3-time Big 12 champ. So, I mean, his wrestling accolades in college are huge. He was a great college wrestler. And now 7 of his 13 pro wins have come by way of knockout. So he's a wrestling pedigree, but he's got a lot of finishing power. This is another fight that I really went back and forth on because, like I said, this could main event its own, Fox card or Fuel TV card or FX card. But as a co-main event, it's a phenomenal co-main event. I think the better overall skill set and the physical advantages goes to Martin Kampmann. I don't like this trend that I seem to be picking up in UFC where you have taller, leaner fighters like Martin Kampmann is who have trouble with shorter wrestlers, which Johnny Hendricks is. But again, I think with the superior skill set and with the physical advantages, I have to go with Martin Kampmann. Kampmann is apparently a slight underdog in this fight, which I find kind of interesting. But I'm going to take Kampmann to win this title eliminator fight and really move up at welterweight to potentially be the next person to face off against the winner of GSP Condit. So I'll take Kampmann to beat Hendricks by unanimous judges' decision. That leads us to the main event of the evening, Welterweight Championship unification fight. George Rush St-Pierre fighting for the first time in 19 months, taking on the natural-born killer Carlos Condit, who I didn't think beat Nick Diaz. But that's enough of my my Nick Diaz homering, but anyways, I didn't think he won that fight. GSP 22-2 on his pro career, 16-2 in the UFC, tied for the most career UFC wins. I think that's a four-way tie at 16, and he's currently riding a 9-fight win streak. I don't have to string off his opponents. GSP has beaten the best of the best. No finishes for GSP since 2009. The knock against GSP for the last couple of years has been that he's just a points fighter, that he fights not to lose rather than fighting to win. As we mentioned, coming off serious ACL injury that has kept him out of action for 19 months. GSP has got more black belts than he's got joints. Don't even take waist. You only get one waist. He's got more black belts than he's got joints. He's a third Dan black belt in Kyokushin Karate. He's a first-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's a Shudokan black belt. He's a Gaido Jitsu black belt, Shidokan, rather. Gaido Jitsu black belt. GSP is one of the best pure athletes in MMA. And again, people like to make the distinction between fighters and athletes, and there is a distinction there to be made. All I'm saying is GSP is one of the best pure athletes in MMA. Carlos Condit, 28-5 on his pro career, 5-1 in the UFC, currently riding a 5-fight win streak. Nick Diaz, Dong-Hyun Kim, Dan Hardy, I believe is that Rory? I can't remember if it's Rory McDonald or Jason McDonald. I think Rory McDonald, and Jake Ellenberger. 26 of his 28 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 13 knockouts, 13 submissions. He is dangerous anywhere. 3 of his 5 career losses have been by submission, but he is a BJJ brown belt under Mike Winklejohn and Jackson's submission fighting. Again, this is kind of awkward. I know Greg Jackson is not going to be cornering either guy in this fight. He's decided to step away from it because it's, 2 of his sort of students, although GSP is now spending less and less time at Jackson's and more time with TriStar. I've been saying for a long time I don't think Carlos Condit has anything for GSP. The only way that I see Carlos Condit winning this fight is if there's mad ring rust on GSP, which there very well could be. I know, GSP's camp is saying, oh, this is the best GSP we've ever seen, and he's going to get back to this killer instinct and everything like that, and we've heard this before from GSP's trainers. Maybe he is the best he's ever been, or maybe he's going to get in the octagon and realize, wow, I've been out of this thing for 19 months, and he might have a little bit of self-doubt there. And if he does, Carlos Condit's going to send him, packing with a flying knee or something. Condit is very fast. I think if you're looking at a pure speed question, Carlos Condit probably has the speed advantage. Quickness advantage, I would have to give to GSP. I think he's quicker. I think he's more agile than Carlos Condit is. I still don't think Condit's going to have anything for GSP. I'm going to take GSP to win the fight, to unify the welterweight title. Probably fight next the winner of Kampmann and Hendricks, because, as we mentioned, Anderson Silva may be deciding to take a year off, so that potential super fight would have to be delayed again. We've been waiting for it since 2008. But whatever. But I'll take GSP to win this fight, to beat Carlos Condit by 5-round unanimous judges' decision. Those are the predictions for you, everybody. I know this is a long video, but it's a big card, and I really wanted to get in everything that I wanted to talk about. Go over the predictions here with you one more time. Featherweight, I've got Elkins to beat Seiler. Bantamweight, I've got Menjivar to beat Gashimov. Welterweight, I've got Riddle to beat McGuire. Featherweight, I've got Carvalho to beat Dam. Lightweight, I've got Stout to beat Makdessi. Lightweight, I've got Bocek to beat Dos Anjos. Light heavyweight, I've got Griggs to beat Diabate. Middleweight, I've got Sakara to upset Patrick Cote. Featherweight, I've got Hominick to beat Garza. Middleweight, I've got Philippou to beat Ring. Middleweight, I've got Carmont to beat Lawlor. Welterweight, I've got Kampmann to beat Hendricks. And in the main event, Welterweight Championship unification fight, I've got St-Pierre to beat Carlos Condit Condit by unanimous decision. Those are the fight picks. I want to know your fight picks in the comment section below. Again, I apologize for the length of the video, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back for the next UFC prediction video. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and I might be fat, but I know my shit about MMA. Don't ever question it.